Welcome everyone, a special day, and I think I'll go ahead and start. Hopefully people have all joined us at this point. And for those of you just joining, again, my name is Heather Ferrell. I'm the Curator and Director of Exhibitions at Burlington City Arts. And we are very pleased to have Clay here with us for our virtual artist talk about his exhibition, Radiant Thought. And before we begin our program, I'd just like to share a few notes on the format. And after my introductions, Clay will give a presentation on the evolution of his work and its relationship to his development as an artist and as an entrepreneur. And we'd love to hear your questions from any of our participants. So please use the Zoom Q&A feature to pose your question, which Clay will answer at the end of the presentation. And it's about 30-40 minutes. And there's also a chat feature if you want to share a comment as we go along. And a reminder that today's webinar will be recorded and posted on our BCA home studio site. So to begin with some introductions, Clay Mohrman is a lighting artist, designer, and entrepreneur originally from Boston, Massachusetts, and now living and working in Vermont. Clay brings together these divergent disciplines of commercial design, lighting, and fine art to create these dynamic sculptures and public installations. He holds a BA in product design from Central St. Martin's, London, England, and he's exhibited his work extensively in Vermont, including such venues as Spruce Peak Lodge, Waking Windows, Casting Coalescence, Hotel Vermont, and Karma Birdhouse. In 2017, he founded his company, which he just mentioned, Clay Moore Lighting, and in 2018, he participated in Jumpstart, a business accelerator program developed by the Generator in collaboration with Launch Vermont. For Radiant Thought, Clay created an immersive light and sound installation centering on his personal response to emotional processing and managing anxiety. And although this exhibition was in the making for over 2 years, it just seems so appropriate now in the times we're living in, as well as any other time. Comprised of plexiglass and lights and programmed to mimic the neurochemical reactions of the brain, the sculpture really responds to an ambient audioscape, immersing your viewer, or us the viewer, with light and sound. It's about approximately 8 foot in diameter, and it's situated in the center of our second floor gallery. And when you walk in, you are completely immersed and immediately feel a sense of relaxation, calm, and mindfulness. And I like to think that rather than taking your breath away, it brings us to a state where we can really center on it and center on ourselves. Clay Mohrman Radiant Thought is part of our ongoing series, Project Vermont, and that's dedicated to experimentation by providing a setting for our contemporary artists to push their practice while creating new work, and often with us helping commission it. More than 2 years in the making, this project evolved significantly, and it really includes a creative collaboration between Clay and 2 other community members, Brittany May for audio and George Philbrick in the interactive technology. And we'd also like to acknowledge the Generator, where Clay has the studio and where he's fabricated the project, and great BCA partners. So thank you for joining us today, Clay, and I'd like to turn the time over to you.
Great. Thank you so much for the intro, Heather. I appreciate that. Let me just start to share my screen here. I'm not the most fluent Zoomer, but I'll try my best. So again, thank you for everyone for taking some time out of your day and coming to listen to me talk. I really appreciate it. It's been a really nice exercise to be able to kind of reflect on this project and really think about all of the steps leading up towards it, and kind of the years really it took to create the piece. You know, it was about a 4-month build time, but there were so many steps leading up to it, different projects, trains of thought. So Heather gave me a little bit of an intro on myself, but just wanted to introduce myself. I live in Burlington in the North End. I've lived here for about 4 years. and just love this city so much. It's really been an amazing incubator for me as an artist, as an entrepreneur, and as a designer. Just a seriously connected community, and just a great way to really start to flex your kind of entrepreneurial skills and muscles, and have a community that's responsive and supportive. I studied product design, like Heather said, which is at Central St. Martin's near King's Cross in London, if you've ever been to London. And my studio is, this is my little tiny studio on the left, in Generator, right next to the laser printers. And Radiant Thought was really a departure from a lot of the stuff that I do in terms of materials. I really work within wood and light mostly. LED has just really allowed us to work with materials that aren't very flammable. And so wood has just been this amazing new vehicle for lighting in the past few years for me, as a way to experiment with, new mediums and things like that. One of the things I wanted to briefly talk about before we get into the whole talk is really this conversation that every artist and designer has. Kind of this conversation between what is design and what is art. A lot of times I've felt like I'm not in the art world and I'm not in the design world, because of how extreme the two can seem in some way, shape, or form. And I've kind of come to accept that I'm a little bit of both. As an artist, I respect form follows function and function follows form, depending on, really what it is that I'm doing, what the project is that I'm doing. For lighting, it has really become the centerpiece of my exploration within art and design because of its ability to speak to design and art. One of the examples I was thinking of where it fits both within those kind of categories is a restaurant being lit by ambient lighting, super cozy, emotional, and you walk in and you're just excited to be there. But the light doesn't provide enough illumination for you to read the menu. And that's where that function comes in of lighting, allowing a space to feel both yourself to feel emotionally connected to the space, but also be able to functionally use the space. And just that little sliver right there is where I like to live, and where I like to design pieces that really speak to both of those two things. How I got into light was a long time ago, my senior year of college. We all joke now, friends of mine, that no one realized that the last project that you do in school is basically what you're stuck with for the rest of your life. I had a friend who designed sneakers and works at Reebok. So 8 years later. So, lighting for me was kind of something that I was drawn to and decided to kind of move towards. I was working with a company called Alessi, which is kind of a home product company that designs, a multitude of different household items. And they wanted to move into the lighting sector. So I worked with them to create this kind of small piece that allowed you to kind of travel it around carry it around the room using the fabric cord and unwind it without kind of unplugging your light fixture. And so shortly after that, I moved back to Boston, Massachusetts, where I'm from, and started to work for a lighting component manufacturer, an optical component manufacturer, basically creating things that fit within light fixtures that enhance the way that light is emitted from a light bulb or an LED or something like that. And I wanted to give this backstory just because I think it really speaks to, again, that experience between design and art. This was obviously on the very heavy design end. we were working with Market Basket as one of our clients, and they were looking to totally upgrade all of their lighting. They use fluorescent fixtures in most of their stores, and just really wanted to kind of come into the 21st century a little bit in terms of lighting. So they had 80 stores, and they were looking to us to kind of retrofit those stores with lighting. And as a designer on the project, I came up with a few other members on the team, this kind of retrofit solution, which was basically to use the sort of drop ceilings that they had, those kind of ceiling tile approach that they had in every store, and just to enhance that and to kind of use what they had, but enhance the kind of lighting that interacts with that drop ceiling. So this is a piece that sits directly on top of the TBar grid and shines below. And this is just some examples of some photos we took of Market Basket, what the lighting looks like. You know, you can see very yellow, just not consistent between store to store, and a lot of darkness. And we really just wanted to improve a lot of different things just to create a different experience. So after we had installed the entire show, or the entire store, the first one, we got to take some photos and kind of really look to see what we had achieved. Of course, higher lumen output, higher CRI, which is a color rendering index, which basically talks to making something pop. You know, a tomato can look very different, vastly different under a different color light, maybe a yellow light versus a bright CRI light, high CRI. And really just kind of understanding that using light, solely light, both physically in the space, what the fixtures did to change the environment, and what the actual light did to alter how people maneuver the store, approach products, interact with the different aisles and the things, was really life-changing for me. I know it's like Market Basket, you know, it's a supermarket, but for me to see the effect that lighting could have on such a grand scale to everyday activity and everyday environment was huge. So fast forward a couple years and moving to Vermont, I wanted to take what I had really learned from working with a ton of engineers and super smart electrical engineers and mechanical engineers, and kind of depart a little bit from that vastly design side and move into a little bit more of an artistic approach to lighting. My idea once I moved here was to really try and connect nature with art and design, and to highlight the beauty of Vermont. You know, so many people move here because of the connection with nature, and just how accessible it is no matter where you live, and how you can enjoy it. And I found this so fascinating, and just really wanted to push using that nature, using the wildness and the beauty of natural materials, and involve them in some of the pieces that I was creating, and some of the structures and the forms that I wanted to create. So this was a first piece, about 4 foot in diameter, globe that was illuminated at night during the kind of darkest months. And I worked with Spruce Peak, and they wanted to come back the next year, and they were like, we want something bigger, we want something brighter, we want something more. And so this piece was really a response to trying to create a piece that people could very much interact with, and very much walk under and explore in the kind of months where we get very minimal light and it's dark at 4 p.m. in Vermont. And it was really inspired. I don't know if anyone is familiar with the the Antler Arch in Jackson Hole in Wyoming, which isn't illuminated, but it looks very similar. It's a little bit more of an organic arch that they have there, but very much signifies what Jackson Hole is all about. And I wanted to do that with Spruce Peak. It really kind of create something that embodied the environment of Spruce Peak, that used nature and its beauty to kind of like highlight and showcase everything that the grounds on Spruce Peak was, and just give people a chance to interact with that on a different level. So as I was kind of moving forward with my practice of creating lighting for people's homes and doing sculptures, kind of living and breathing sculptures in people's homes using wood, I was also really wanting to connect with how people experienced the work and what their connection was with the work, and how lighting can continue to enhance an environment and communicate with the people who are experiencing the art. And so I was working at the time at the Radio Bean in downtown Burlington with Brittany May, who you see there in the center. And she makes like spectacular music, very emotional and ambient, and just music that once you see live and you see how lighting interacts with her as is, it really made me want to try and figure out lighting that was tailored to her experience as a musician, as an artist. So we collaborated and worked on this show called Casting Coalescence, which was a 30-person kind of ticketed little event, very small. And I really see as the kind of beginning of Radiant Thought and where we came. And we wanted to create an environment that allowed people to view and experience music while also being stimulated in other ways, engaging with the sculptures, walking around. It was completely immersive, surrounding Britt. She didn't want to be at the center on a stage where people were staring at her. She wanted to be adding to the environment and the space that we were creating, allowing people to kind of continuously connect with each other and the experience that they were having. And I'll show you just a little, this is a little teaser trailer of the experience, just to kind of get a sense of the space of where it was. And after casting Coalescence, one of the things that Britt and I kind of came together and decided was that we wanted more. While watching people engage with the lights, we wanted the lights to be interacting with something in the room as well, connecting that experience even further to what was happening around everyone and, you know, experiencing the music, further engage the viewer into a state of complete presence and connection with the music and the sound and the space that they were in. So our next big project was at Waking Windows, which is a music event that happens in Burlington every May, I believe. And it was an incredible opportunity to get to showcase some lights. The lighting that you see here on the stage was connected to a piece of equipment that we designed with a third member of our team that we had brought on, named George Philbrick, who is a student at UVM, who is integral to Radiant Thought. And George is really the engineer and coder behind creating this vision of allowing the light to respond to music, and to follow the volumes and the different levels of how the music is connecting with the people in the room. And so it was an incredible experiment for us to watch people firsthand respond, to see lighting directly respond with the music that was playing. And I think we were approaching something in a new way, because it was really an opportunity to use lighting to adapt to different types of music. So typically you see with lighting is that it responds directly to electronic music, to a really hard electronic beat. And the light basically flashes on and off. So creating this kind of technology where the light had more subtlety to responding to the different types of sound that was being created was really kind of the core of what we were looking at doing. So it was a real enhancement of the music and reflection of whatever music that was being played, instead of just kind of loosely reacting to it. And so after that project kind of had concluded, and simultaneous to Radiant Thought, something happened, which I'm sure everyone's aware of, the pandemic. And even though the project Radiant Thought that I had been working on was still scheduled to happen and to exist, a lot of life had stopped, essentially. My studio completely closed down from March to, I think, July, early July, middle of July. So I was living in Warren, Vermont at the time, and was really looking to connect with art and make art and find new ways to, as a self-identified creator and maker, what did this look like for me? What was I going to do with this time on my hands that I had to make and create and reflect upon the experience that we were having, and using the materials that were around me in Warren, Vermont to make art. And Birch was this thing that, as a woodworker and as someone who uses wood in all of the things that I make mostly, Birch was something that I had always put on the shelf as something that I had wanted to use for a very long time, but just was waiting for that right moment to find Birch and to use Birch. And as I was doing research into Birch, I was finding that typically birch trees, when in a grove, are called a sister birch, which basically means that their roots and the way that they grow are interconnected, and they are dependent on each other. One, to protect the root system, and the leaves to shade the bark, which actually fries pretty easily in the sun. So needing that shade and needing that community-based approach essentially to surviving was this theme that had kind of evolved out of just using the birch as a beautiful material. And simultaneously to this kind of discovery, I had been participating in a series of connection circles, they were called, by a friend of mine. And those connection circles were a response again to the situation where we were living, and which was completely disconnected from our friends, our community, our families, just like really requiring some kind of connection in some sort of way, understanding that, we need each other to survive, and we need to process emotion as a community and as an entity, and to grieve and to process together. And just the value of being able to do that with friends and people around you was really at the heart of this connection circle. And I just kind of started to see these crazy parallels using Birch and just kind of what it signified in that kind of time frame. And I started to create these Birch panels that were just small bits of deconstructed Birch that I found, and kind of cut them in small geometric shapes to kind of reassemble them and reimagine, what they looked like, and kind of connecting different pieces together, and really using a super process-driven type of exploration to kind of process what's going on and think more about these like kind of concepts and ideas. And so Bliss Baker, a friend of mine who was running the connection circles, and I collaborated, and we wanted to create a connection circle surrounding identity, surrounding emotional processing, surrounding vulnerability, and the importance of vulnerability in a time when we're cut off from the people we love, and how to connect with people we don't know right off the bat, and how to make new connections and during this time. So we decided to create a connection circle tailored to emotional identity. And I was going to make a series of process videos that kind of show this kind of time intensive process that during the pandemic, where to kind of metaphorically show that processing, and then that slow kind of understanding of the reality of really what's happening, and also create these 2 panels, and I think there were 6 in total, Birch lights, and kind of really think about emotional identity in this way. I have a video going forward of the connection circle that we ran surrounding emotional identity, where we asked 10 people, strangers to each other. We shared on our Instagram and through different social media methods that we were running this, and it would be recorded, and different people volunteered to be a part of it. And this is a small clip of that connection circle, overlaid on a video of myself harvesting some of the birch bark, and kind of the start of some of the material you see here, to some of the lights. And the question that was asked to everyone in the group was, describe a time when something didn't go as planned. How did you choose to react, and what did that teach you about your identity? And this is Jack speaking.
I was like trying to figure out between a handful of them and like what really helped define my identity. I was like struggling with, what do we mean by identity? And the example I settled on was when I was working outdoor education, there was a day that I had a class that I really didn't want to teach, and my co-teacher really didn't want to teach it, and we kind of had the choice of which one of us was going to teach it. And like if I got to choose, like I didn't want to teach that canoeing class because it was a rough day and everything was just like looking terrible, and it just like seemed like not a thing that I wanted to do. And at a certain point, like my co-teacher was just expressing the same feelings that I was feeling. And in that moment, I was like, oh, okay, well, I'll just be the person that this other person can rely on. And I just did it. I like didn't think twice about it. and I just kind of like jumped up and did it, and it was hard, but it ended up being fine. And the thing that I take as a part of my identity is that I really want to be someone that other people can rely on. And so like when it comes to my pain versus somebody else's pain, like my pain doesn't matter as much to me. My struggle is less hard than seeing somebody else struggle. So I always want to make life easier for other people. And I don't know if that, like, I think that comes from like a values thing, is I don't value my own emotions as much as I value other people's emotions. But it ends up looking like I'm a pretty reliable person, and if somebody needs help, like they can come to me for help because I'm going to help them. So it like presents as pretty positive, but deep down I think it's less positive.
So I guess what really the objective of that exercise was to start to really think about what our emotional identity is, and what that means, what is tangible about that, and how we process emotion, and how we process what's happening around us actually begins to define who we are as a person. You know, that external stimuli begins to, the way that we react to it really defines who we are. There's a quote that we were researching found that by Robert Dyer that says, if you squeeze an orange, the only thing that will come out is orange juice. Basically meaning that everything that is inside of you was already there. Everything that's coming out of you was already there. It's not an external force that's creating your reaction to something. And so some of these concepts are, you know, just kind of, again, in line with trying to think about our identity as a person, both physically and emotionally.
I was like trying to.
So as I was saying before, Radiant Thought was kind of happening before Sister Birch, and was to be installed and created just after. We had been working, I'd been working with Heather and Colin very closely to try and figure out when the exact date was of installation. But just to go back a little bit and kind of reflect on where this project came from, and the continuation of the casting Coalescence and the different projects relating to the light responsive technology. It was really a conversation with Heather, I think, and Colin, where they were kind of questioning, you know, what is this about? Why are you using the wood in this piece for an idea? And I guess it was one of those moments where I decided that I wanted the work to be a personal reflection about myself, instead of creating a space and an environment that responded to different sound and to music that was created. I wanted it to really be a reflection about something that I had been processing. So really, the only obvious answer to me was to use my own journey with mental health and processing anxiety and trying to figure out what that looks like through art as a method of healing and understanding myself more. I'm a visual person, and it was really my goal to try and create a visual map of what it looks like to process emotion, what it looks like for me, how I process things that are happening around me and dealing with it. And making art was a huge part of that. So the next slide is just a little bit of a teaser into what the final prototype and the, the final piece looks like. I think it's always fun to kind of see where I came from. And this was honestly two days of just kind of crazy thought taken from a sketchbook and just created this piece. And then a lot of external work otherwise, in making a written meditation, an ambient soundscape, and using some waves that I found from the internet to kind of respond to that sculpture. So I'll just show you a short clip of this.
How your body feels. Notice the sensation of your body touching the floor. The weight of your head, your arms, your fingers. Scan your body from head to toe, starting with your head and ending at your toes.
Just a quick glimpse into showing how the light is responding directly to the music that's being played, and it's actually directly communicating with it via a wire. This is just a quick look into building the entire show. The piece hangs from a 4-paneled grid made out of wood, with thousands of different pieces of fishing line suspended from some plexiglass. And then each of the small bits of plastic had a little hole drilled into each one of them, and were then suspended from each piece. And so each quadrant was constructed almost like an orange segment, as a part of a sphere, and created here in Generator and tested, and then transported to the BCA. And I actually created this video a couple days ago as kind of a teaser to releasing, and a kind of a build up and a reflection again on this project. And I loved doing it. It was kind of creating a mood board for what this project is about, and just really kind of highlighting some of the amazing qualities that I think that Radiant Thought can really get across. We used a lot of ASMR-like sounds, which is autonomous sensory meridian response. I don't know if anyone's ever seen YouTube videos of people, creating these ASMR-like sounds. It can be someone brushing their teeth, or whispering in a very small voice, or typing, or anything that makes sort of a textural sound, which people have found to be very therapeutic in the way that people react with sound, and can really be soothing to some people. And we wanted to really highlight some of those sounds, walking through an old house, the sound of a heart beating, and what that does to you emotionally, what that makes you think of, where that brings you when you hear that sound, similar to smelling apple pie, what emotional memories, things like that, can directly trigger. And so this is a small little teaser of the piece that I wanted to show.
Take a few big, deep breaths. Acknowledge any discomfort and release it with each breath.
So, even from the moment where there's leaves that kind of are crinkling, in communication with Britt saying the word discomfort, you know, kind of signaling that words have audio connected to them, and how that can kind of further enhance an experience, thinking about, you know, the audioscape behind everything. This part. And then here's a little look into the installation of the whole fixture and the whole sculpture. As you can see, I had installed the grid, the wooden grid, and the plexi onto the panels there, and drilled thousands of different holes that were holding the small bundles of all the plastic, which was obviously the most fun part, detangling. I think we had a team of like 7 people on just detangling them. Thank you to everyone who helped. And you can see Kate here going for it. And I really wanted to circle back just once to just the art that is this circuit board. The subtlety that was created when I was talking earlier about the electronic music. We were trying to create something that responded to waves crashing. So the subtlety in the noise variation of a wave crashing is huge. The way the buildup happens and the fall, in terms of what that looks like on audioscape, and really designing software that responds to that is an art in itself, creating the ability of that software to respond to subtlety in volume and type of audio. And so you can see here too, that this is a 3-channel. So there's the meditation, the spoken meditation, the ASMR, like ambient noises, and the wave track. And the wave track was really to kind of metaphorically speak to breath and kind of the constant that is breathing to keep you centered while experiencing the sculpture. And here's the final piece, which was probably the hardest thing I've ever had to photograph, due to the nature of the way that the light turns on and off, the way that each tiny individual piece is slightly moving, because they're so light that even someone walking by, the vents turned on will slightly shimmer and move each piece, and the overall darkness of the room. So yeah, this one took a lot. It ended up being hours of really trying to figure out the right settings to appropriately capture the fixture. And before I show you a small clip of the piece, I wanted just to briefly talk to you about really visually look at this kind of concept of a neural network, and how I was trying to kind of metaphorically and visually represent what's happening in our brain when we respond to something. One of the books I was reading surrounding doing some research on the project was through a psychologist who was mapping where emotion lives in our brain, and was bringing up emotional characters and people and situations to some of the subjects, and would be watching what happens in their brain, and watching as the brain would ignite when thinking about love. You know, that would bring them to family, and that would bring them to their pet, and that would bring them to different memories of where they had experienced love, and just really kind of reveling in the fact that how complex emotions are, and how much space we need to give them to really process them and experience them. And just kind of visually to look at here the nucleus of a neural network, and the axons and dendrites that are sending information from network to network, or from nucleus to nucleus. And the light really, as you can see, was kind of the visual metaphor for those nucleuses, and just how they sent information out to different parts of the sculpture. And I'm going to just briefly show you a little clip of the piece installed, and then we can move to questions.
As you settle into the space around you, find a comfortable place to observe. Take a few big, deep breaths. Notice the weight of your body and how it connects to the ground beneath you. Sink into your body. Are you there? Let your gaze settle on whatever is in front of you. Bring your awareness to your feet. Feel the weight of each and every toe. Slowly start to scan upward through your legs, to your back, and into your chest. Feel your heartbeat.
So I'll end the clip on that, and if you would like to see the full clip, I shared it on my Instagram, and happy to send it to you if you wanted to see more. So yeah, thank you for going on that little ride with me, and we can open it back up.
Well, thank you, Clay. This has been a wonderful presentation, and thank you for sharing, more about your work and your ideas, especially, as it relates to that whole idea of the interconnection between art and design. I always think that's very fascinating. For those of you who joined us later in the program, today's webinar is recorded and will be posted to our BCA website. And for now, we'd love to turn the time over to answer some questions from our attendees. So let me, oh great, we have a couple already. This one is from Liz Pierce, and she says, you've used wood in the majority of your pieces. What fueled your decision to use, she says, plastic in Radiant Thought? So maybe give us a little bit more in-depth idea.
Hi, Liz. Thank you for asking a question. The plastic was really a departure from wood for the function being the most important part. I wanted to mimic those axons and dendrites in kind of the neurochemical situation. And the way that the plastic that I used is an advanced kind of lighting chemical that basically diffuses light rapidly and very well. So it was really just, instead of using wood, wanting to use a material that would enhance what I wanted the light to do, which was to spread out and connect and diffuse throughout the sculpture.
Great, and maybe to follow up on that, Clay, there were a couple of questions too, just about how you fabricate your work. And I think maybe for your smaller wood lamps or even sculptures, and then versus Radiant Thought? Like, is there a similar process that you undertake, or could you give us a quick overview of that?
With the woodworking, or just in terms?
Let's start with the woodwork, and then let's start with there, and then maybe we can move briefly to Radiant Thought. Like, do you start with designs or sketches, or do you just kind of play with materials in your studio?
Yeah, I mean, I know it's like the birth of the idea. Where does it kind of come from? With the woodworking, a lot of it is centered around the form factor. I want the light to exist in the wood. So with LED, it's such an exciting material because it doesn't have to be a bulb, you know. It doesn't have to, you don't have to create just a shade that surrounds a light, even though that can be beautiful and amazing in a ton of different applications. You know, you could create something linear, you can create something like a spiral. So really, it always starts with the light for me, wanting to do something new and different with the light, and allowing the wood to be a kind of visual enhancement to the way that the light has been designed.
That's fascinating. And how do you get the kind of almost the perfect symmetry in these spheres, small scale or large scale? That's incredible.
Sanding. My least favorite thing. A lot of sanding.
I like it, sanding. Yes. Well, I have another question here. Let's see. Okay. One of the questions is about just this idea of scale. And if you, like, what were the challenges when you scaled up, not only for the Spruce Peak, but also for Radiant Thought? What changes for you as an artist?
I think scale is such a tricky component to sculpture, because, you know, you can create this kind of small prototype on the table and say, all right, let's just do that, but bigger. But I think some of the constraints you realize, I know for the ball, the sphere, and the wood arch, the amount of wood needed, I underestimated on both occasions vastly. I thought it was, you know, let's say truckloads, a flatbed truckload. I thought it was going to be 4 or 5. I think it turned out to be 15 of scouring for driftwood and finding that. So, you know, planning, sometimes there's always an X factor, you know. And then secondly, is just the time and mental strength it takes to do those repetitive tasks on end. Threading the fishing line through the plexi in the quadrants for Radiant Thought was, honestly, I thought it was all going to end during that process, because it was just so monotonous and so detail oriented. But it was really the method that I had come up with that felt like the only way to kind of get across what I wanted to do.
Yeah, that is very insightful, and I like that clarification. And you touched on it during the talk, but I just want to tease it out more. Is that the wood, the material, at least with the woodworks, that's all found. It's all driftwood. So when you say you're getting, you know, multiple flatbed trucks, you're going out to certain sites and gathering it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
that's impressive.
Different sites around. A lot of the wood you see that's, you know, stick based is all found materials, but some of the new pieces that I'm working with kind of are trying to integrate a little bit more of maple hardwood and some veneer. The way that the light shines through veneer is just stunning. So kind of trying to integrate wood in different ways, which kind of speaks to why, you know, I use the plastic in Radiant Thought over wood. You can't shine a light through it most times, unfortunately, you know, so finding different ways to illuminate it.
And I also thought it was interesting. A lot of artists do it, but yet I think the average viewer or visitor isn't aware of just all the different prototypes that you're trying these materials out. And I think even our initial poster for the show was really your prototype, the video that you showed. Is that something that you do even in your product line as well as your artwork, or is it just depend?
Yeah, absolutely. I feel like that's a you hear the classic situation of someone in school. You get to the same end result in the math equation, but you don't show your work and you have no idea how you got there. And I love sketching and I love drawing, but it never ends up being the way that I process and think and problem solve in my work. It's always has to be three-dimensional in some way, shape, or form to really realize, okay, how is this going to connect? How is it going to secure? How does it fasten together? And how does it look when light is really, within the sculpture? Because there's only so much predicting and imagination you can do.
Right, and then you have to execute it. Well, I do want to credit Lynn Reed, who had one of our fabrication questions. And then I also want to pose a question from Heidi Nichols, who says, what's next for Clay Moore Lighting?
What is next for Clay Moore Lighting? I think I mentioned it just briefly, but I'm just kind of switching gears from the art side totally and installations to working on a few pieces of a line of lighting of 13 different pieces to allow people to kind of take some of the wooden pieces that I have been creating solely based on a commission structure and create a more easier way, and to create an easier way for people to purchase the lighting and put it into their homes. So basically a wooden based lighting line using LED.
Okay. And I know you mentioned earlier that is taking up kind of 120% of your creative energy, but I'm curious as well as Mohrman, whether what's next, or how are you evolving with your artistic pursuits? What would you like to do? Any ideas?
Definitely, this was the tip of an iceberg in terms of wanting to explore the gallery space. Your world, Heather, in a lot of ways, just being able to completely control the environment. I think lighting already does control the environment of whatever setting that it's in, but really pushing that more. As soon as the second I had it installed, Radiant Thought, I had 100 different ideas of how I would do it again or differently, or kind of continue on this conversation of emotional connection with lighting and how it affects our mood, our well-being, that kind of thought.
Well, and I know on behalf of BCA and so many of our visitors who shared their comments, is that you've done that so successfully. You've made a connection with our visitors in person, especially in a pretty trying period of time that has really elevated it to one of the finest immersive installations we've presented. So thank you so much, Clay. And I really appreciate your time. And I know we have a few more questions, but because of the format of the program, I might have to hold those for now and encourage people to contact you directly. But before I sign off, I always do those quick thank yous because they're so important for bringing such great programs and artworks as Clay's to the Burlington community. And so thank you again, Clay. I'd also like to thank Colin Storrs, our curatorial assistant, who was very integral in supporting and organizing Clay's exhibition with me. And he's also our resident Zoom webinar master and expert behind the screen. I'd also like to thank our communications team, John and Ted, for helping promote and support today's program. And exhibitions such as Radiant Thought would not be possible without the financial and in-kind support of our funders. And so a special thanks to Mascoma Bank. They're our presenters of 2020 as well as 2021 year of exhibitions. the Andy Warhol Foundation for the Visual Arts, the NEA, and the Vermont Arts Council. And Radiant Thought is also presented in part of the 2020 vision reflecting on a world-changing year. And this is a statewide exhibition initiative by the Vermont Curators Group. And so I encourage you to learn more. You can pick up some of their information in our gallery or online. And again, for those of you who haven't had a chance to see Radiant Thought, it is on view through January 30th. If you feel more comfortable, you can virtually visit with a 3D version of the show, a little more challenging, or you can book a private pre-opening tour. We have a few slots left on Wednesday, January 20th and the 27th. And again, most importantly, if you need some additional joy and light in your life, be sure to contact Clay, learn more about his lighting line. And I know on behalf of BCA, we just feel so fortunate to have your work here in our community. Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Take care.